You write that one person's freedom is another person's unfreedom, and you set up this theme in the preface by quoting Oxford philosopher Isaiah Berlin, who said, "Freedom for the wolves has often meant death to the sheep." How does this imbalance manifest itself in American society?
Well, there are so many examples and understanding that was one of the motivations for writing the book. One of my motivations was that the language of freedom had been seized upon by the right. In fact, the extreme right Republican caucus calls itself the Freedom Caucus. And my view is they didn't understand freedom. And the point that you just raised illustrates that. And the obvious example is they advocate the freedom for everybody in the country as a basic human right, that everybody should have the right to carry an AK-47 everywhere that you want. Now, carrying an AK-47, having all those in your home and all that, opens up the opportunity for mass killings. And almost every day in the United States, there is a mass killing. And the response to that is that you give the freedom to carry an AK-47 at the expense of the freedom to live. And it's even worse than that, because another freedom that Franklin Roosevelt, one of our great presidents, that we should be thinking about as we welcome one of the worst presidents, he talked about the freedom from fear. And the fact is that we are instilling a sense of fear in our children. They have to have training of what to do if a gunman enters the classroom. You know, where do you do, how do you get, at the level of kindergarten and first grade. And parents have the fear that their children may not see their children. They may not. So this fear is pervasive. I mean, it doesn't happen. It happens every day somewhere in the United States. And so that's an example. Now, at the particular moment when I got motivated to write the book was during COVID-19. And we were having this big debate about masking and vaccination and social distancing. And there you had the freedom not to get vaccinated, not to social distance, not to mask, conflicting with the freedom of someone else not to get the disease, not to be hospitalized, not to die. And one of the points I try to raise in the book is that if we had a rational discussion of which of these freedoms is more important, I think most of us would say the inconvenience of a few wearing masks is not as important as the freedom to live or the freedom not to be hospitalized. And the same thing goes in the case of the guns. So what I'm really trying to call for is recognizing that there are these interdependencies and then having a rational discourse. Milton Friedman, who is another gospel of neoliberalism, of these free markets, wrote a book with his wife called Free to Choose. And I really said the name of the book should have been Free to Exploit. Because when you strip away all the regulations, you give firms the power to use their market power to raise prices, to exploit vulnerabilities. And then you have thinking about the banks taking away what was called financial liberalization, led to the financial crisis. People losing their homes, losing their jobs. So the freedom of the banks wound up taking away a lot of freedoms of ordinary citizens. And then as taxpayers, we lost a lot of, you might say, our freedom. We had to bail out the banks in the United States to the tune of $1 trillion if we were going to avoid a collapse of the entire economy. So we were held up to ransom. We had a choice. Do you want the economy to collapse, or do you give us $1 trillion? So that is another example. Freedom of the banks took away the freedom from the rest of our society. So that was why, I argue really this notion of free, unrestrained enterprise really is taking away the freedom from the rest of our society in an important way. And that's why you need regulations to stop, and these regulations that we have don't come there because each of the regulations originates because of some reason. We have banking regulations because we had the Great Depression.
You talk about progressive capitalism. What is it? What does it entail? What is the role of government, and what is the role of the market?
So progressive capitalism is a term, I didn't know exactly the right word. I wanted a word that was the antithesis of neoliberal capitalism. And so the best I could come up with was progressive capitalism. But let me, to try to distance myself from my own word, let me explain. Capital is not the main feature of capitalism that I talk about. What is really important, or the main feature of what I talk about, is that there's a rich variety of institutional arrangements. And so we often talk about private enterprise on the one hand and government. What I try to emphasize is there's much more than that. There's many forms of collective action. There are unions, there's civil society, there are cooperatives. The only part of America's financial system that behaved reasonably well before 2008 and after 2008 continued to make loans to small businesses were our cooperatives. Our cooperatives are called, in the finance sector, are called credit unions. But they actually did not engage in the predatory behavior that the banks, the predatory lending that the banks, they did not engage in the abuse of credit card practices that the banks did. And that's partly the culture was different. They were cooperatives and they were supposed to be working in the interest of the members of the cooperative. And it would have been so antithetical to that to go out and exploit the members of your cooperative. I talk about, in the United States, one of the most important institutions, I think, and this is self-interested, I think of our universities. And if you look at the universities, none of them are for-profit, none of the great universities are for-profit institutions. They're either state universities, by state I mean public universities like University of California, or they're not-for-profits, charitable foundations like Columbia, Harvard, and Princeton. And I think that, emblematic of for-profit universities are Trump University. Trump University had only excelled in one thing: how to fleece its students, figuring out what their ambitions were, getting money from them, and not delivering. And so, and I don't know if you know, it was sued, and in order for Trump had to pay millions and millions to settle these suits. The point I want to make here is that there are many different kinds of institutional arrangements, and depending on the activity, you may want to use different kinds of institutions. That I think education is better done by public institutions and by the kinds of not-for-profit institutions that I've been associated with. When I see a hedge fund buy an old age home taking care of people with Alzheimer's, I worry. What is a hedge fund's comparative advantage in running nursing homes? Well, I know what a hedge fund's comparative advantage in general is. It's taking advantage of people. And in this particular case, people who have Alzheimer's are not really able to monitor whether they're being taken care of well. And so it's just a source of worry when I see a hedge fund go into that market. I can give you lots of other examples where I feel more comfortable in a care economy when it's people who really care. And as we move to the care economy, this may become a more important part of our society.